If unseasonable weather has got us confused, then it's certainly playing havoc with the wildlife. It's the 28th of October 2017 and Phiz has been waiting for the fallow rut to get into gear. This, like many a recent year, has been warm, too warm, which means the fallow deer in these woods are not exhibiting typical behaviour.
7, 8 years ago, when I'd come out in the rut, you used to have to wear really thick gloves because it would be very cold, frost on the ground, and certainly the rut would be a lot more active in that. There'd be a lot more bucks running around, a lot more bucks fighting. Today is actually the coolest day we've had all year, and it seems like no coincidence that it's also been the most active as far as the rut's concerned as well.
Phiz has one of the largest and possibly oldest rutting stands on his ground, and it is being uncharacteristically quiet. But with a 12-degree drop in temperature overnight, we're hoping to capture one of the most exciting moments in the year in the life of a fallow deer. Before we take our chances at the rutting stand, Phiz wants us to meet someone pretty important in the deer world. Fred Marshall used his knowledge of deer to come up with a technique for exporting wild deer by air, and it was so successful he sent them to every corner of the world, establishing parks and breeding programs across Europe to China and New Zealand.
When did you take up deer stalking, Fred?
Well, as stalking, I suppose, was in '58 when I took a rifle.
Okay.
And that was a 9mm Mannlicher, open sights. It had been Dr. McIndoe's in East Grinstead.
Okay.
And he used it he called it his zebra rifle. And when he died, his wife sold all his rifles, and I was fortunate enough to
You picked that one up.
Pick that one up,
Yeah.
and it did its job.
It did the job all right.
Yes.
So you had open sight. So what was your sort of maximum distance you'd shoot at with that?
Well, I sighted it in at 300 yards. I was learning.
Right.
There was nobody to teach me.
So you must have had one of the first rifles and firearm certificates in this whole area.
Yes, there were very few people with full-bore rifles in Sussex. Mainly it was landed gentry that shot in Scotland. So I was basically one of the first stalkers to shoot wild deer in Sussex with a rifle.
When Fred started managing deer, there were 200 fallow in Ashdown Forest. Over time, other isolated populations came together to create a force of nature.
We're now getting deer that are crossing with deer from other parks, and it has improved the antlers, if anything.
Has it improved the quality? It's not all bad.
But in the old days, to see a palmated fallow was almost... it was years before I shot a palmated fallow.
Now Phiz, like many deer managers, knows the economic value of a deer carcass. So can you guess what Fred was making in the 50s and 60s, if anyone would buy it?
You got paid £1 a pound for a carcass of venison in those days, £1. But if you shot them in the neck, you got 1 and 3. So I learnt to shoot deer in the neck very quickly.
It may sound a little, but a nice buck did pay for his first scope, though it wasn't a Swarovski. Time for the rutting stand and for Phiz to put his binos to the test. He's bringing his Blaser R8, but he never shoots on or near the stand.
We tend not to shoot the bucks ever from the actual stand because that completely upsets the stand. So we have high seats positioned generally 200, 300, 400 metres around, not far from the stands. There's often a lot of movement from the prickets in particular, and they'll be coming through to go and actually have a look at what's happening in the main stands. and as they come through, if they hopefully go past one of the seats, someone will get one. When we first came in, it was pretty quiet. And then this big guy, which is lying down, he started grunting. And then a group of does and a pricket came running in from another direction. It just seemed to stir it up. What's interesting is, a week ago, when normally the rut would be in full swing, it was completely dead.
There is movement, but it looks as if we've arrived the morning after, the night before. Everyone looks a bit worse for wear. There are a few youngsters with a spring in their steps, but the master buck looks absolutely shattered. One of the concerns about the late rut is the youngsters are born that much later in the season and need to get strong quick.
We found some fawns in the last couple of years in late summer that have been, really, really tiny. Again, all I can think of is that it's the rut is getting later and it's continuing well into November, and the result of that is late-born fawns and smaller fawns that probably have survived the last few winters because the winters haven't been harsh. But if we do get a hard winter, some of those smaller fawns just won't make it.
On the other side of the estate, Phiz's friend Rob Gearing has been up a high seat waiting for bucks.
Lots of row.
Was there?
Lots of row, but very quiet on the fallow front.
On the.
But he's clearly been busy because he's got very muddy antlers.
Right,
Yes.
so he's been thrashing around.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good one to shoot, Robbie, isn't he? He's a really good one. Yeah, that is a real perfect cull buck.
Yeah.
I was explaining to David about the way that we set the high seats away from the stands.
Yeah.
So
Pick up the satellites.
Exactly these smaller bucks that are coming in for a look. Give you a hand with that, Rob.
Oh, swap out.
Yeah. Let's stay on that side. That's better.
Rob has a new fallow
that's the one to
call,
use.
so Phiz decides to give it a blast, back where we were.
It's a bit like playing an instrument.
Yeah, you got it too.
After multiple efforts to pull them out from the cover, we get the impression it was a heavier night than we'd imagined.
Amazing to see a really nice quality buck like that on the estate, and not a buck that I've personally seen on the estate, and to be honest, the majority of the bucks we see during the rut on the stands we've never seen before. They'll come in from the likes of the Ashdown Forest a few miles away. They could rest up there all summer, nice and peaceful, and then when the rut kicks off they come pouring into the estate to these ancient rutting stands which we've got here. And as I say, what we saw this morning was pretty unique, and David did a very good job of stealthily stalking to within, I'd say, 35 metres of him while he was asleep, I must say. But
Yeah, not me.
The pressure is always on Phiz to shoot a lot of deer to keep his landowners, farmers and foresters happy. But he certainly doesn't want the fallow gone. Far from it. The weather may be influencing the timing of the rut, but this deer manager is not upsetting nature's will by leaving the best buck in the area to do his thing, even though he looks terrible for it.